My involvement in FAN has been very rewarding over these past decades. I'm proud to support them. I'm proud of the work they've done. I am delighted with the kind of enthusiasm that they've created all throughout the community to help our arts organizations continue to grow and flourish. It's important for us to continue to support organizations like FAN who do so much to help our community grow.
It makes me feel good to be a part of this effort, and I hope that it will encourage others to also to be generous and supportive of the arts in our community.
The thing I hope most for FAN is that we can continue to do things where we make a significant difference and bring arts projects to the public. Nurturing creativity and bringing enriched programming for the people who live here is what we're all about. And I hope that can continue into the future. To FAN, a wonderful organization that makes this possible.
Remember, FAN is where friends meet friends to support the arts.
Michael, thank you for being with us here today. As my favorite word artist, Jenny Holzer, has said, you must have one grand passion. And we know that your grand passion is the arts and culture. So we're really lucky here in Miami that for decades you have given us your passion and made it a driving force for our community. Michael's department is something I think of like a multiplex because it serves more than 1,000 local cultural nonprofits, and they go to him for technical assistance, workshops, community planning, and grants. And I want to publicly thank you, even though Joanne has already mentioned it, for your help with us with 50 over 50 when we initially began. And Michael remains our go-to person, and we still show up at his doorstep. Well, I love that the video ended by emphasizing transforming the arts, something FAN certainly believes in. And Michael, tell us about this current state of the arts and what is here in Miami. How has it been transformed? What's its status? What's driving forces behind that growth? And if you can remember all those questions still, how have Miami arts organizations' needs changed since your department began?
You know, Miami's cultural community is phenomenal because it's largely that first-generation arts community. It got built over the course of the past 30 years or so, which is unlike the arts community in any other major urban area in the United States, which takes generations to build. So there is a miraculous nature to Miami's arts community that we're incredibly proud of, and it's even surprised us. I was saying earlier at lunch at our table that 30 some odd years ago we said this would happen, but I'm not sure that we even believed it. And then it did happen, and it happened in a much bigger, better way than we could even imagine. And I think the factors that went into this phenomenal growth of Miami arts community can be summarized as a few. When I began my work with the Department of Cultural Affairs, Miami was having an epiphany as a community. And that epiphany was that Miami's business and civic leaders had concluded that they no longer wanted Miami to be a seasonal tourist town, you know, where we came alive during a certain period of the year and then we went to sleep for the rest of the year. They wanted Miami to become a major urban center, and oddly enough, at that time, we aspired to be more like Atlanta. You know, we've set our goals above Atlanta now, but at the time it was Atlanta. And the idea was that we would be a year-round community that would be a hub for tourism, trade, commerce. And it gave us, at the Department of Cultural Affairs, a gigantic opening to say, there is no major urban area in the world that doesn't have a world-class cultural life. And we also followed that quickly by saying, you don't get a world-class cultural life unless you invest until it hurts. And so we made this case emphatically over and over again that in order for Miami to reach its destiny as a great place to live, visit, and raise a family, you had to have a great year-round cultural life. So that was one. And then we got lucky, and this is certainly not the most popular interpretation of immigration today, but it's the one that I prefer, that we were blessed with waves of immigration to our community that provided us with an infusion of human talent. So it was artists, it was art supporters, it was families who had a tradition of going to and patronizing the arts. And this human capital ended up providing this sort of magical combination of cultures that came to become a Miami voice in the arts. And that's still happening today, because every time there is some kind of disturbance in Central or South America or the Caribbean, we're the beneficiary of all of this wonderful human talent that comes here, relocates here, and creates work here. And that work has given Miami a reputation as being one of the most vibrant, energetic, and new places on the face of the earth. So that influx of talent was a gigantic advantage to Miami. And then the last factor, Debbie, that I would refer to is leadership. Because leadership makes all the difference. One human being who's irrationally committed to getting something done can change the face of a community. And I would say when you and your colleagues came to me years ago and talked about 50 over 50, which became the Funding Arts Network, it's just that kind of leadership that was happening in our community that gave rise to the infrastructure that's necessary to support a complex arts community. And I've had the great fortune over the years to work with civic leaders and elected officials who exercise that leadership in the face of lots of competing needs. Because I think the thing that we can all agree on is Miami is a young community filled with problems. I mean, when I meet with cultural groups, the first question they ask me is, can you solve the transportation problem? You know, it's kind of like, that's not what I do, and I really feel fortunate that that's not what I do, but we have a lot of competing needs, and so you could easily make the case that we shouldn't be funding the arts, we should be funding trains and buses and trolleys and all the rest. But people with courage and leadership concluded that this is a valuable place to make investments, and that kind of leadership got us to where we are today.
So actually, the New York Times a number of years ago called Miami a petri dish to kind of show what's happening in the country. And I think what you're talking about is evident with that. So that's where we are now. Where do you see us going in the future? What changes do we need to make or continue with to keep up that momentum? What are the challenges that will be facing us to keep us this vibrant city?
You know, some years ago I was invited to participate in a roundtable discussion that WLRN broadcast, and there was a lot of conversation about Miami and what it's like to live here, and one of my colleagues made the observation that you know, Miami is a really surfacey kind of town. You know, you go to South Beach and you see bodybuilders everywhere and glamour and glitz, and you know, there wasn't a lot of depth here. And I was just so frustrated with that observation that I said, you know, yes, you know, we are glib, but we're surprisingly deep too. And I think one of the challenges that Miami faces is still an image problem about who we are and what makes us who we are. But I think more seriously than that, there is a human fascination with the new and the shiny object. And we are now getting to the point where our cultural community is no longer new. It's turning the corner to a second generation. And it requires lots of responsible, serious investment to sustain the great things that we gave birth to over the last 30 years. And that means that civic leaders have to volunteer to be on boards, and donors have to continue to make serious contributions to sustain our organizations from small to large. And we have to set down roots that sustain the more than 1,000 nonprofit arts organizations that make up our community. And sometimes that's not the most attractive work to do, but it is the most important work to do so that we don't lose things out of sheer neglect or out of getting used to them not being new anymore.
So, Michael, when you mentioned the word second generation, would you delve into that a little bit? Because to me, it's another generation, another demographic, another age group, and such. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean all of those things, and we're not unique in this regard because, I mean, those of you that follow the arts nationally in America today know that there is this generational shift as the traditional supporters of the arts get older. They're looking at the next generation and wondering whether or not that tradition of supporting the arts is part of the makeup of those people. And I tend to be, there was a dancer who still works in town who characterized me as being pathologically optimistic. And I think that's true. I'm willing to admit to that. And I'm seeing the next generation of art supporters come up and assume the mantle of that responsibility, but it is a torch that has to be literally handed off so that people understand that that's their responsibility, that this civic life, this civic and cultural life that we build, and it's not just the arts, it's social services, it's education, it's health, it's all the things that make a community vibrant, have to be stewarded.
And how is this shift changing the programming in the community?
Well, I don't think the shift is changing the programming, but I do think the programming is evolving. And programming evolves as a result of what's happening in the world, Debbie. And we were talking a little earlier about arts organizations that are now becoming focused on issues like climate change and sea level rise, and our organizations here have been focused and continue to focus on the issues around immigration. And so I think you'll see arts organizations evolve both in the quality of what they're presenting and in the content of what they're presenting too. And that evolution is healthy and it's impressive here in Miami.
So about climate change, which you just mentioned, what's happening in the 2020 year that we can be aware of with arts organizations?
Thank you for that setup question. So I have a relatively new chairman of my board. It's the first artist who's ever chaired the Cultural Affairs Council, my advisory board at the county, and it's Xavier Cortada. And those of you that know Xavier's work know that his practice as a visual artist focuses on climate change and sea level rise. And so Xavier came to me and he said, Michael, it would be the proudest moment of my life if during my tenure as chairman of your board, we could do something as a cultural community to help address the health of the planet. And so I had just come back from a national meeting. I serve on the board of Americans for the Arts, which are a national service organization. And we had a guest speaker at this meeting. He was the president and CEO of the Independent Sector, which is the organization that serves all the nonprofits in America, whether you're an educational nonprofit or a cultural. And he had talked to our board, and one of our board members at Americans for the Arts said to him, what are the two biggest issues facing nonprofits today in the year 2019? And he said without hesitation, the two biggest issues are sea level rise, climate change on the one hand, and democracy on the other. So when Xavier asked me to deal with climate change, I thought, I got the easier issue.
They're going to deal with our democracy out there, please.
Yeah. So our department is about to launch a green initiative, which will involve a number of different components, and I'll just summarize them so we can get on to another subject. But one initiative that we'll put forward is we're going to make awards of an Arts Resiliency Prize to organizations that have the most innovative approach to addressing sea level rise and climate change. We're going to commission 5 visual and performing artists to do new works addressing the same theme of sea level rise and climate change. We're putting together a graphics and public relations kit of materials that arts organizations can use to inform audiences of things that they can do to be friendlier to the planet. And we're doing all of this in conjunction with the county's Office of Resiliency, which is working on this across disciplines and across fields. So this initiative should roll out sometime over the next few weeks.
That is great. So we are going to, in Funding Arts Network, continue to inform our members of various things through not only our website, but through e-newsletters that you'll be getting. So if you will help us get some information, I think it would be willing to distribute it to everyone. And speaking of distribution, thank you for giving us those pages that talk about 15 fast facts about Miami-Dade County and the arts. And if there aren't enough at your table, Michael says they're on the website.
Yeah, you can download it from our website, and it's cultural propaganda.
The Cultural Affairs Department that you have just mentioned is so nimble and risk-taking and innovative. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of your other experiments and things that you've included?
Yeah, I think it's kind of odd and to be self-congratulatory for a minute, laudable that a government department actually takes risks. Because, we, in government, we have the reputation of being kind of bureaucrats and, we sort of sit back and we wait for things to happen, but our department hasn't been anything like that, and we're willing to do unconventional things to address community needs. And I'll mention one very early thing that our department did, and then I'll mention one more recent thing that we're doing now. One early thing that we did is when I first started with the department, and I talked about this influx of immigrants, who have enlivened our community. Many of those folks that arrived here and formed cultural organizations didn't speak and write English. And they were intimidated by government to begin with, because government was nothing but barriers for people. And so when my staff came to me and said, hey, we're not getting applicants from Hispanic organizations because they can't fill out our forms because they don't actually write well in English, we came up with the idea to provide these organizations with money to hire bilingual grants writers to write grants to us. So we actually paid the groups and recruited a series of bilingual grants writers who helped these organizations write grants to us. And we called it Arts Help in Espanol, and then we used it to develop Arts Help in Creole for Haitian organizations. And that provided that sort of welcoming embrace to organizations that otherwise felt that government was intimidating and uncaring about their work. So that was one of the earliest things that we did. I never let our elected officials know.
Is that still ongoing?
It still is ongoing, but it's less necessary now because we find that most organizations are fairly conversant in multiple languages. So that's one thing. And then most recently, or more recently, and many of you may be familiar with this, we were really concerned some 15 years ago or so that most arts organizations didn't have the bandwidth to market what they were doing to high school and college kids. And these are young people that are at the very age where they're making their own decisions about entertainment. So we did a bunch of focus groups with high school and college students, and I sat with them and I said, so, what do you guys do for cultural experiences? And I got blank looks. And then when I prompted them a little more, they told me that they went to the mall. And then when I prompted them a little more than that, they said they went to the movies. And then when I said, well, what about going to the theater or a dance performance or to a symphony orchestra? The response was, that's not for us. People aren't inviting us, and it isn't meant for us. And so I said, well, what if we provided a way for these activities to be addressed specifically to you, and we made the tickets less expensive than a movie ticket? And they said that they would try it if we did that. So we formed a program called Culture Shock Miami, which to this day provides $5 tickets to almost everything in town. Our cultural organizations donate the tickets to us, and then we post them on the website. The website is directed to high school and college kids ages 13 to 22. We're selling thousands of tickets a year, and they're to virtually all of these kids who otherwise wouldn't go to a cultural activity. Every study you'll ever read about people as adults who go to the arts say, if you didn't go as a kid, you're not going to go as an adult. So that Culture Shock Miami program is still going on and still growing.
Well, you also did an innovative program that helped this community learn about art news, because as all of us know, the news in the newspapers and other media has been dwindling. So can you tell us about that initiative?
Yes, so the same rabble-rouser dancer, yeah, thank you very much. Same rabble-rouser dancer that said that I was pathologically optimistic led a group of dance community representatives to my office one day, and they complained bitterly that the Miami Herald was not covering dance. And I have a weakness for dance because I just love dancers, and it's a mystery to me how you actually do that, and so I'm susceptible, and I felt really badly. I didn't have a solution because I know what was happening to journalism even a decade ago. You know, that advertising revenue was diminishing and coverage in newspapers was evaporating, and so I brooded about it for a while, and I had been called over to the Knight Foundation one day soon after that to give them some feedback on a program they were about to begin. And on the ride on the Metro Mover train over, I had this idea. And so I was meeting with Alberto Ibargüen at the Knight Foundation. I said, at the end of the meeting, I said, I have this other idea, and I know you're a former publisher, and I just wanted to bounce it off of you and see what you think. And I said, what if we opened up our own Arts Media Bureau, and we hired editors in English and in Spanish and writers, and we covered the arts and uploaded the coverage to a website and made it free of charge to any media outlet that would carry our byline as a way to increase media coverage of the arts. And Alberto looked at me and he said, I just came back from a publishers conference. I didn't hear an idea as good as that there. I'll fund it. And so I was like, well, I didn't really ask you for any money. And so I went back to the office and I told my staff, hey, we're getting money from the Knight Foundation to do this. And they looked at me like I had lost my mind, right? But we went ahead and we founded Artburst, which we then moved over to the Arts and Business Council because I never wanted there to be a relationship between funding and coverage. Because I don't want people to say that the Department of Cultural Affairs is directing coverage of the arts. So the Arts and Business Council now manages it. We have editors and writers who cover the arts in at least 2, sometimes 3 languages. And if you pick up your Miami Herald and you look for the byline, you'll see the Artburst byline on virtually all the arts coverage in the Herald now. And we started with dance, we moved to theater, we're now in music, and now covering the visual arts as well through Artburst. The sort of remarkable thing about Artburst is how inexpensive it is to do. And this was a revelation to me how little journalists get paid. I mean, it was just shocking to me. Because
right, the newspapers are cutting back.
Yeah, and they don't pay them much to write an article.
Right.
So Artburst is a big success story for us.
So of these success stories, do you have a favorite war story?
Gosh, I've been doing this for 36 years. I could talk to you about war stories for days, you know. So it's hard to know which one to pick. I will tell you that there are some funny moments in county government. And there are things that I wouldn't normally say, but I think I'm in a group of people that are kind of like family and friends. So among the many things my department does is we manage the county's public art program. And that requires that all new county buildings devote 1.5% of their cost to commissioning public art. And so we had used the public art money from a parking garage to enliven the lobby of the government center building where I work. And we commissioned an artist to do a Miami artist, some of you may know Ivan DePena, these wonderful light panels in the lobby that are activated by people walking by them. So you actually see the silhouette of people activated in these light panels in the lobby. Commissioned Ivan to do this work, and we're getting ready to install the work, and I'm thinking, you know, I better tell the mayor. Because I don't want him to show up to work one day and see this new artwork in the lobby and then wonder, well, how the heck did that happen? And we were in the midst of the recession, and we were also in the midst of budget season for the county, and I mentioned it to the mayor, and he said, do you know how bad this is going to look? we're spending all this money on artwork and I'm cutting the budget, in our police department. He said, don't install the work yet. And so I said, really? I said, you think people are going to make that connection? He says, yes, absolutely. He said, as a matter of fact, never install the work. So I've already paid for it. The work is done, So I said, well, I tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. We'll wait till after the budget's approved, and then we'll install the work. And he said, I'll make a deal with you. We'll talk about it after then. So the budget gets approved, and I explain all this to Ivan, the artist, that we're holding off on installing the work. And the mayor is still very much against installing the work of art in the lobby. So the mayor, fortunately, gets invited to go to Israel for a week. And I'm thinking, this is my opportunity, right? So I call Ivan. He needs 3 days to install the work. And I said, the mayor leaves Friday. I can get you in the building on Saturday. We can have the work of art installed on Monday. The mayor arrives at the end of the week. We'll have a full week with the artwork active, and let's do it. So Ivan comes in, he installs the whole artwork. The building goes crazy. People love the artwork. They're dancing in front of it to see their reflection in the digital lights and all the rest. By the time the mayor comes back, the artwork is the talk of the building, right? They all think it's fabulous. And he couldn't say a thing about it. So. I would say the mayor is very supportive in general of public art. I don't have to say that, but he is.
So actually that leads into art in public places, which your department, I think you commission, you curate, you maintain, you do all of those things for it. And how is that going, And in fact, if I can also tell you that FAN has had a members-only bus trip that went around to see the art in public places.
It used to be, we have one of the county, Miami-Dade County, has one of the oldest and one of the most distinguished public art programs in the country. And it used to be a separate agency inside of county government, and it was merged into my department about a dozen years ago or so. And it's the most fun I have. I mean, it's also the most controversy, because you can't get away with doing public art without getting in trouble. But we're commissioning millions of dollars of public artwork for public buildings and public places now, and we're emphasizing the commissioning of Miami artists, and I'm really proud of that. And we're giving a lot of Miami artists their first public art commissions, and that's also risky because they've never done this before, right? And so public art isn't just creating a painting or a sculpture, but it's often a floor, or a curtain wall, or a railing, or some integral part of a building. And so I'm really blessed to have an incredibly talented public art team that includes general contractors and architects that work for me that sort of wrap their arms around these artists and ensure that they're successful. We have at least 2 members of the Art in Public Places Trust here today, the board that oversees the program. I think Paula and Carol, raise your hands. And they're the people that give me They give me the courage and the support to do all of this risky work that we do with public art. But yeah, we're always in trouble about public art, one way or another.
Any more war stories you dare tell us that we say will stay here in the Miami Shores Country Club?
Well, as a segue, I would tell you a public art war story, and this was a tricky one because I got called up to the mayor's office one day, and he said, hey, Michael, I want you to go with me and have lunch with Derek Jeter. Do you guys know who Derek Jeter is with the Marlins? Yeah. And I was like, Derek Jeter? Wow, that could be fun. Although my sixth sense went off like, this can't be good, right? If I'm having lunch with Derek Jeter. So he said, yeah, Derek really doesn't like the Red Groom's home run sculpture in right field. And he wants to talk to you about what we can do about that. So, and he said, I know baseball must be like a foreign land to you. And I said, really? I mean, as a kid, I grew up being a big baseball fan, and so the mayor and I began to have this discussion, because the mayor's a really big sports guy, and he says, okay, if you're such a big sports fan, name the starting lineup of the 1964 New York Yankees, which I proceed to do, right? And then he argues with me about who the catcher was. So I said, Google it. And I ended up being right, Yay. So off we go to have lunch with Derek Jeter at the ballpark, and we're in one of the suites, and at the time in the suites, they had all these historic baseball photographs. So I'm talking to the Marlins vice president and the mayor standing next to me and the Marlins vice. I said, oh, these are great photos, historic photos of great baseball players. And he says, yeah, I think that's Carl Yastrzemski on the wall over there. And I said, he never played for the Detroit Tigers. That's Al Kaline. And so the mayor's looking at me like, who is this guy that I'm with? So ultimately, we agreed to move Red Groom's home run sculpture from right field and got the Marlins to agree to fully pay for the cost of relocating the sculpture to outside the ballpark to the northeast corner of the ballpark. And by the end of this month, the complete restoration and moving of the sculpture will have been accomplished, and the sculpture will have a new, wonderful life on the outside of the ballpark. So it is a good news story to some degree. It really was painful for us to make this decision to take it out of right field. But there are moments in a career when you have to do something like that. And what you try to do is try to be as respectful as possible to the artist in the course of doing it. And Cheryl Jacob is also on the Art and Public Places Trust. Yes.
So there are very many people here today that have raised their hands to show how new they are to this community, and it just occurred to me they may not be aware of the 2% that we have. Does that fall under you for the
We were
arts?
just told we have 10 minutes.
It's a short answer.
Yeah.
When a builder builds, they have to have 2% of their art construction costs going to art.
It's 1.5.
It's 1.5. Okay, so we had
2% on the beach?
2% on Miami Beach, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
We sit corrected. Thank you. So you said, Michael, that FAN's more than $4 million of awards is one of the most significant total arts investments made by a private funding consortium in Miami-Dade's history. And here in FAN, we want to continue to make our investment potent. What do you think we should be aware of? What should we educate ourselves about? How can we connect with you all learning issues and such?
I mean, I listened to the introductory presentations from FAN board members, and the work that you do is just so thorough and thoughtful, Debbie. You know, it's not just about reading paper and seeing what people are proposing, but going out and actually experiencing the arts is the most important thing that you can do. And there's no magic to it. You just have to get really familiar with the people and the artists that are presenting the work here. And I think continuing that commitment to actually experiencing the arts, which is part of the DNA of FAN, is going to be the formula for your future success as well. And I meant every word that I said about it. At a moment when priorities in the private sector were not focused on funding the arts, FAN was a gigantic billboard for the importance of investing in the arts in this community from the private sector, and it continues to be that. And so when you see others follow, right? I mean, your sister organization, Broward County, that was inspired by FAN, and you see individual donors like George Perez, who established a fund at the Miami Foundation now. I mean, you are the precursors of all of that, of deliberate investments in the arts to make sure that this community continues to grow. And so you have nothing but my undying admiration for the courageous work that you've done.
Thank you, Michael. That's a beautiful statement. If some of you have written questions for Michael, I think we have some. The cards are at the table. If not, use the back of a credit card. Well, while we're waiting for those to be picked up, what keeps you up at night, Michael?
Well, I have 2 cats that decide that they want to sleep on me. So that does keep me up occasionally at night. But I think the one thing that really does keep me up at night is, and I had a discussion with Mayor Jimenez about this Monday of this week, because the mayor loves to actually understand more about the dynamics of things. And when I began my work with the arts, there were arts teachers in the schools. And there was sequential learning about the arts, all the arts forms, whether it was dance or theater or music or the visual arts. And over the years, because of the emphasis on testing, that curriculum-driven instruction in the arts has evaporated to where it becomes optional at best. And unless we're actually teaching the kids an appreciation of the arts, we're not going to have the audiences and the supporters of the future. And we have one of the most progressive superintendents in the country in regard to the arts. Superintendent Carvalho is great, but his hands are tied in terms of what they can do in the course of a school day with kids. Many of our arts organizations have taken up the slack, and they're increasingly working with kids, and we're funding a lot of that work. We're funding $3 or $4 million a year worth of work that's directly focused on making sure that kids get experiences in the arts, but it's not enough. And it's the kind of thing that really does bother me and keep me up at night. You no longer have to have arts credits to graduate from high school. There was a time during my career when you did, and we have to get back there somehow or another. And it has to be a focus for people's advocacy so that it doesn't get ignored or neglected as the economy recovers, as we recover our senses about how to teach kids the things that they need to survive in the world today.
A few of the questions really relate to FAN, and I'll be happy to answer those questions after the meeting is over to those of you who have those particular interests. One of the questions is kind of fun. Will the home run sculpture survive outdoors?
It's actually been completely re-engineered. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but my staff and I have done our own cost estimating, and we think that the Marlins have spent close to $2 million to move and re-engineer the artwork. And there's nothing that makes me happier.
So we expected that someone would ask about the Coconut Grove Playhouse and its status.
Okay, so I'm going to be brief about the Coconut Grove Playhouse because we could go on endlessly about this. The City of Miami Commission supported our application to proceed with the Coconut Grove Playhouse. Mayor Francis Suarez vetoed his own commission. So we have appealed that decision in the appellate division of the Circuit Court. And we have a court hearing scheduled for the day after the Super Bowl, February the 3rd. It will be the Super Bowl of the Coconut Grove Playhouse, to hear our case. And I am absolutely convinced that the brilliant attorneys that I work with in county government will win the case and that we'll proceed with constructing the new Coconut Grove Playhouse.
That is good to hear. One of our audience wanted to know more about the diversity that both we represent and your department represents, and I think that's an excellent question because both in FAN and in Michael's department, we are trying as much as we can to bring in more people from every aspect of our community, both bilingual, trilingual, etc., or from different cultures. So I thank you for trying to ask that. One of our members is concerned about the underserved communities and our transportation in this community and wonders if some things are happening now to make that happen. Availability, that is.
So, one of the observations and explicit strategies that we've had at the Department of Cultural Affairs is that transportation's not going to get better here in the short run. And so a lot of the major cultural activities have been clustered in the community's urban core, which we define as downtown Miami and Miami Beach. But our explicit strategy at the department has been to establish a network of neighborhood cultural facilities and activities so that people can enjoy the arts closer to where they live and their kids go to school. And so, because that's just the reality. People in West Kendall are not coming downtown at the end of a busy workday to go to the Arts Center or to PAM, and instead there need to be places closer to where they live and where their kids go to school. So it's not random that we built the South Miami-Dade Cultural Arts Center, or that we've invested in facilities in neighborhoods all over the community, because we really do think that that's a way to give people those opportunities and that introduction to the arts in a really first-class way. And until transportation gets better here, that's the name of the game. And we're about to break ground on a brand new cultural facility in Tropical Park, which we're calling the Westchester Cultural Arts Center, which is on Bird Road and the Palmetto Expressway, because that's a tremendously underserved area of relatively moderately income families who could gigantically benefit by having a cultural center there. And in about 12 months, we'll have a new cultural center at the entrance of Tropical Park to serve those folks.
Great. Congratulations. One of the hallmarks of FAN is that we try to start and end on time, but before we are ending on time, we have a surprise that Michael does not know about.
Uh-oh.
We have a very special thanks to you for being here today. Our fans, as you can hear from Michael's conversation today and from being aware of all the things that he and his department are doing, can easily understand why, in my mind, I see you as Superman. So you've achieved so much more for the arts with superhuman efforts. You have words more powerful than a locomotive, actions faster than a speeding bullet.
Oh, God.
And though you don't leap over tall buildings, and there isn't an old-fashioned phone booth here set up for a Clark Kent-styled costume change, I hope a special gift will come in handy when you next appear before the City Council.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, yes, absolutely. Here. Thank you very much.
The culture of FAN, as determined by Debbie Hoffman 20 plus years ago, is we begin and end on time.
Well, thank you, Debbie and Michael. Thank you, Joanne Bander. Thank you, Maureen Gregg. Looking forward to seeing everyone at our upcoming Cultural Camaraderies, Screening Committee kickoff meeting, and in the month of March at our next quarterly luncheon. Enjoy the wonderful day.